Welcome back. Ugandan lawmakers have approved a constitutional change which would remove the age limit of 75 for presidential candidates. The change allows the current president, 73-year-old Yoweri Museveni, to run for an unprecedented sixth term in office.
After 3 days of debate, Uganda lawmakers voted overwhelmingly to remove the age limit of 75 for presidential candidates. Members of parliament voted 315 to 62 in favor of the amendment. Opposition lawmakers walked out of the debate, which was marred by violence on more than one occasion, and 6 others were suspended for protesting against the bill.
I'm disappointed that our own constitution, which is supposed to be durable, as it is stated in the preamble, has been amended just like that.
The bill to amend the constitution was introduced in Parliament on October 4 by a Museveni loyalist after 2 consecutive days of brawling in the debating chamber between those opposed and those in favor, supported by security personnel.
This bill is like any other normal bill. It's not special. It's like any other bill. And to us, it is normal business. There's nothing strange about it.
Wednesday's vote was the second time the Ugandan parliament has changed the constitution to allow President Museveni extend his rule. In 2005, they voted to remove a limit of 2 5-year terms which blocked him from standing again. The bill also extended the length of a term for members of parliament to 7 years from the current 5. The limit of 2 terms was also reimposed for the president, although that only means Museveni would be limited to 2 more terms starting with the 2021 election. But opposition legislators say they will continue to oppose the amendment.
The journey we are going to embark on is the journey Kojikuteko. What next after you have touched the constitution? What next after you have broken the hearts of Ugandans?
Ugandans on the streets of Kampala were not happy with the parliament's decision. Several African leaders have amended laws designed to limit their tenure. Such moves have fueled violence in countries including Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. Initially hailed for restoring political order and fostering economic growth, President Museveni has lately come under mounting pressure fueled by runaway corruption and accusations that he uses security forces to maintain his grip on power.
In North Africa, a South Sudanese rebel group on Friday accused government troops of attacking their base only 1 day after the parties signed a ceasefire agreement in a 4-year war that has killed tens of thousands of people. The ceasefire that will allow humanitarian groups access to civilians caught in the fighting formally came into force on Sunday morning.
South Sudan's government and rebel groups signed a ceasefire in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa on Thursday, December the 21st, in the latest attempt to end the 4-year civil war and allow humanitarian groups access to civilians caught in the fighting. South Sudan's Information Minister Michael Makwei-Luth says the signing of the agreement means progress can be made on resolving political issues in the world's youngest country.
Today we have signed the cessation of hostilities, which marks the beginning of the end of hostilities in the Republic of South Sudan. Today we have signed the cessation of hostilities, and with it we will create the necessary conducive atmosphere so that these parties who were at war would now sit and discuss some of the provisions of the agreement which were unimplementable so that we can implement them.
Ethiopian Foreign Minister Workneh Gebeyehu also urged relevant parties to honor the agreement at the meeting.
Signing the cessation of hostilities agreement was merely an expression of goodwill that must be followed with the process of implementation. And this is equally a responsibility of all South Sudanese stakeholders.
The ceasefire aims to revive a 2015 peace deal that collapsed last year after heavy fighting broke out in South Sudan's capital, Juba. A decision by President Salva Kiir to sack his deputy Riek Machar triggered a war fought largely along ethnic lines between forces loyal to Kiir, who is Dinka, and Machar, who is Nuer. Tens of thousands have died and a third of the population of 12 million have fled their homes. The conflict has since mutated from a two-way fight into one involving multiple parties, and this has made it harder to find peace.
French President Emmanuel Macron arrived at the Barkhane base in Niamey, Niger on Friday, December 22, to share an early Christmas dinner with the soldiers deployed there fighting jihadists in the Sahel region. Mr. Macron spent the night with a force made up of around 500 French soldiers before holding a meeting with Niger President Mahamadou Issoufou to discuss the empowering of the regional G5 Sahel force.
French President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute on Friday, December the 22nd, to the French forces in Niger fighting jihadists and traffickers in the region since 2013.
Mais ce soir est un moment.
Tonight is a little special because you feel the distance of your families that much more than usual, but also because the Christmas truce does not appease the tensions and the conflicts you are here to quell.
Parce que cette trêve de Noël.
Mr. Macron says France will not give an ounce of territory to Islamists in the Sahel and the Sahara, just as the international coalition is about to defeat them in Syria and Iraq. He says the new G5 Sahel force is growing and will ensure security in the region in the future.
We must not leave the Sahel to those terrorist organizations that we are defeating right now in the Levant, and just as our forces, within a few months, I hope, in the framework of the international coalition, are about to win on the ground in the Iraqi-Syrian zone against Daesh, I do not want to give an ounce of territory to the terrorist forces in the Sahel and the Sahara.
The strengthening of the regional force should eventually allow for a gradual pullout of the 4,000 French soldiers of the Barkhane operation. It is French tradition to visit the troops before Christmas, but the task usually falls to the Minister of Defense rather than the President. Niger is engaged in the fight against jihadist groups in the Sahel, against Boko Haram, and shares a border with Libya, which is plunged into chaos. But the country also faces a migratory challenge as a transit country.
In other news, the UN Security Council has unanimously imposed new sanctions on North Korea following its latest intercontinental ballistic missile test, a move that analysts say could have a significant impact on the isolated country's struggling economy.
The U.S. drafted resolution that passed by a vote of 15-0 seeks to ban nearly 90% of refined petroleum product exports to North Korea by capping them at 500,000 barrels a year, and in a last-minute change demands the repatriation of North Koreans working abroad within 24 months.
Their arrogance and hostility to anything productive has set their country on a destructive path. 9 times before today, we have asked the North Korean regime to choose the path of peace. And if they do, we would welcome them back into the community of nations. But Pyongyang has chosen the path of isolation. As we have in the past, we will continue to match the Kim regime's choice of aggressive actions with actions of international sanction.
The resolution will also cap crude oil supplies to North Korea at 4 million barrels a year. The United States has been calling on China to limit its oil supply to its neighbor and ally.
Today, we have banned the import of nearly 90% of refined petroleum products to North Korea. These products are used by the regime to resource their illegal nuclear and ballistic missile programs. By cutting off this supply, we will restrict their ability to develop and deploy these weapons. We've also banned North Korean exports of food products, machinery, and industrial and electrical equipment. We've taken another important step to end the exploitation of North Korean workers who are sent overseas with the sole aim of generating earnings for the regime.
Tensions have been rising over North Korea's nuclear and missile programs, which it pursues in defiance of years of UN Security Council resolutions, with bellicose rhetorics coming from both Pyongyang and the White House. North Korea on November the 29th said it successfully tested a new intercontinental ballistic missile in a breakthrough that puts the U.S. mainland within range of its nuclear weapons, whose warheads could withstand re-entry to the Earth's atmosphere. China, which supplies most of North Korea's oil, has backed successive rounds of UN sanctions, but had in the past resisted U.S. calls to cut off supplies to its neighbors.
Finally, Currently on the program, as the world celebrates Christmas, the successors of St. Francis of Assisi, who invented the nativity scene, have put the baby Jesus in a crib made of bullet shells in their yearly provocation, drawing attention to those suffering around the world. The crib is outside the basilica in the Italian hill city of Assisi, the burial place of the 13th century saint who is the patron of peace and the environment. The Franciscan monks, who choose a different theme each year, said the bed of 445 bullet shells honors the estimated 445 Roman Catholic priests, nuns, monks, and lay religion teachers killed for their faith around the world since 2000. And that's Diplomatic Channel this week. Thanks so much for watching, and do have a very Merry Christmas. I'm Timmy Tokwe.